Well, it is so good to be here. Thank you so much. Thanks for your hospitality. Thank you for your warmth. Thank you for all that you're doing. And before I get started, I just want to say you guys have amazing pastors. You have an incredible pastor in Evan and Emily Martin, and I haven't just known them for the duration of Colorado Church being planted, but actually have known them for many years, and so I say that because I can say to you that a lot of what you see about somebody's life is lived out over many years, and I can say to you that based on my relationship experience and watching their lives for many years, that they are people of integrity. They love God deeply, and they love you deeply. And I cannot think of better pastors for you all. And I just want you to know that you have amazing people leading you and leading this congregation. And it's an honor to serve as an overseer here at Colorado Church. One of the things that I get to do, like Evan said, is just to talk with him and find out how he's doing and lean into anything that's going on in terms of Colorado Church, as well as anything that's going on in their lives, and asking them questions about where are you guys at, how's your marriage, and how's your time, and are you balancing all of those things, and you got 1 million kids, so how are you managing all of that, but I also want you to know that I pray for you. I pray for Colorado Church, and I believe in what is going on here, and it is an absolute and amazing privilege to be here on this special day of moving into a new facility, opening up additional seats, and being in a place where I'm excited to see God move and God grow and God add to what God is doing here at Colorado Church. And so know that you are prayed for, not just Evan and Emily, but all of you prayed for and being cheered on by not just me, but all of Mill City Church in Fort Collins. So when you hear somebody say, "What's that smell?" multiple things can come to mind. But if somebody says, "What's that stench?" it creates a new picture, right? What's that smell could be something amazing. You walk into somebody's house, and what's that smell? And it could be the whatever's cooking on the stove. But if you say, "What's that stench?" you automatically go negative. And the reason is that language is powerful. Our words are powerful. And I believe that language shapes imagination. In other words, the words that we use create pictures in our minds. And so the language that we use not only shapes our imagination, what's in our imagination actually creates and leads to action. And the reason that I bring that up is because when we talk about church, the language that we use and that we come around in terms of what we say it is or what we engage in matters. Because language shapes imagination, and imagination shapes action. What's that stench means that your action is probably going to be, I got to get away from that. We got to somehow open some windows. I got to get away from that stench. I'm going to close my nose. I'm going to do something about that. So the same is true for church. So when I might ask you, how would you describe your church? Chances are that some of the descriptions would be, well, we meet on a Sunday morning in this place called Merrill Middle School, and we actually just moved there, and it's really awesome. It's got some extra space, and this is how it works, and this is the location, and this is what it kind of starts out as, and this is what the worship's like, and this is what, and on you would probably describe it. A lot of people would describe it like that. But if I were to say to you, describe your family, chances are you wouldn't say, well, on Mondays, it's Taco Monday. Mondays are Taco Monday, and we really like gathering together. We usually gather about 5:15 or so, and we sit down, and actually we don't sit down. It's more of like a buffet style, and so we get together, and we, I'm kind of a beef guy, but I'm a soft taco guy. I'm not a crunchy taco guy, but we have both options, and we sit down, and so everybody's loading up their tacos, and then we sit down, and I just love Taco Mondays. That's our family. You're like, wow. We wouldn't describe our family by one particular gathering on a Monday. It might be an aspect of what we describe in terms of the closeness or the ways in which we engage with one another, but chances are we're not talking about one particular time in the week. And too often church gets described as the hour or two or three or whatever happens on a Sunday morning, but the reality is that church is so much bigger than the building that we enter or the service that we attend. See, church is more than a building you enter. It is, in fact, a family to which you belong. And so this is amazing. And this is so important. And just like Taco Monday is an important aspect to the development of a family. Closeness, engagement, catching up with one another, hearing about what's happening and stories about the weekend, about the week ahead, about all those things. And the same thing is true for church. This gathering spot, see, we have this cultural narrative going on in our culture. Oh, this doesn't matter. This gathering together, it doesn't matter. We are the church, so why do we need to come together and just gather to do church? The reality is, it's just like a family. We are a family. I have 4 boys. Parker, Cohen, Brooks, and Smith and Associates. It's a law firm. And we gather together. We have meals, but we are family. But we do something to cultivate family too. And so you all are the church. But you also have to do things to cultivate to be the church. And this is one of them. This is not the only thing. Church is not merely a service you attend. It's an aspect of it. It is a community into which you engage as well. You engage the community of God. Now, here's the problem with all of this, because some of us actually kind of like attending. I kind of like that church is Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. Like, that's good. That's church for me. That's good. And that's not the case for maybe many of you, but there's some of us, and it certainly is true for the world in which we live, that we kind of like actually that church is just, I think of church as 10 o'clock to 11:30 or whatever time or whatever location. Because if we think of church as family, then that means that there's the possibility of mess. Because relationships are messy. Relationships can be difficult, but this is what I'd like to present to you today and suggest, is that church is designed to mess with you. Church, I don't mean like just this. I mean church as family is designed to mess with you. It's designed to get you a little bothered sometimes. It's designed by God, by the way, to ruffle our feathers every now and then. It's designed by God for us to be a little like uncomfortable with things at times. Because, see, if we think that because we love Jesus, that being a part of the family of God is the no problem zone, you're going to be so disappointed. Maybe you're new here at Colorado Church today. Welcome to a messy family. I say that because sometimes the expectations are, oh, we love Jesus, and then we bump into something and we experience some mess, or we experience some disappointment from somebody, or maybe even Evan disappoints you. The pastor disappoints you. Doesn't preach the message you want, doesn't show up where you want him to show up, doesn't do what you think he should do, and you're disappointed. And if we think that somehow that church is not going to disappoint us, that it's not going to bump us, then you're either going to find yourself moving from church to church to church to church, or you're going to find yourself outside of the benefits that comes with planting yourself in and expecting to and bumping into some of those things and going through it together. And so the problem and the reason that it's messy is because family means that you're surrounded by people who are not exactly like you. Does anybody have a crazy Uncle Jack in their family? I mean, maybe his name's not Jack, but the crazy uncle. And some of you are like, I don't. It might be you. You just think about that. Right? You get together for Thanksgiving coming up here in just a few weeks, and you're like, looking forward to the turkey, and looking forward to a football game, and looking forward to hanging out, and crazy Uncle Jack. He's probably going to make an inappropriate comment at dinner. Probably going to say something, or I don't know. And in churches like that, somebody makes an inappropriate comment. Somebody says something you don't like. Somebody posts something on Facebook. But see, the reality is we actually need crazy Uncle Jack. We need not just crazy Uncle Jack, but we need those who have been around for a while and those who have not been around for a little while. We need the old and the young. We need people from all different varying backgrounds. I love what the Apostle Paul says in Ephesians chapter 3. In Ephesians 3, he's writing this letter to this church in Ephesus. It's a young church. It's a fledgling congregation, but it is a Gentile congregation. But there are some Jewish people there, so you've got, and they've got centuries worth of animosity towards one another, and some people saying we're clean and we're the chosen generation and they're not, and there's all these different things that have been going on in their world throughout the years. And this is what the Apostle Paul writes to them in chapter 3, verse 19. So now you Gentiles are no longer strangers and foreigners. You are citizens along with all of God's holy people. You are members of God's family. He doesn't just say like, oh no, now you also can be saved. He says, no, you're members of God's family. And you're like, okay, great. Gentiles? Most likely the vast majority of us in here are all quote unquote Gentiles, not of Jewish origin. And so Gentile, Jewish, some of the animosity and tension that would have been present in that particular day, we don't necessarily feel or we don't necessarily understand. It's not necessarily something that's like, we don't feel that tension. So what about if we just change the words a little bit and say, so now you Democrats, or so now you Republicans. So now you who are different than you. Those who annoy you, those you have tension with, those you have animosity with, guess what? You're no longer strangers and foreigners. You're citizens along with all of God's holy people. You're actually all in the family of God. The diversity of political leanings, the diversity of socioeconomic status, the diversity of race, the diversity of opinions, the diversity of all the things that we bring together. God is saying, you're now a family. And some of you might be like that crazy Uncle Jack to someone else, but you might be crazy Uncle Jack to someone else too. But he doesn't say, so if you find that person and if you find yourself in a place where you're at odds on a particular issue or a particular idea or the way that you do this or you do that, he doesn't say, go find another family. You're in the family of God. See, if we surround ourselves only with those exactly like us, it only makes us more self-centered. If we only surround ourselves with people who are exactly like us, it only makes us more self-centered. Why? Because who are the people that are most like us? It means we like ourselves. Now, that's good. You should like yourself. But there's something about the ways in which when we're around somebody that's not like us, that bumps us a bit, that is so important for us. Ephesians, to continue in Ephesians and Paul's letter as well as some of his other letters, and Jesus does this as well, they use family language all the time. Brothers and sisters. He doesn't say, Ephesians, to the church at Ephesus and all its attenders. He says, brothers and sisters. And then he starts talking about things like forgiveness and unity and love. And so in Ephesians, Chapter 4, verse 2, he says, be completely humble and gentle. Now, I don't know about you, but I could just stop there and say, well, that'll take me the rest of my life. But he continues on, be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. And then he says in Colossians chapter 3, verse 13, church of Colossae, different church, but he says, bear with one another. It's like he's writing the same thing. And forgive one another. If any of you have a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgives you. Why is he writing this? And I could give you 10 more scriptures that basically are the exact same thing or sound very, very similar. Why is he saying this? Because they need to forgive each other. Why do you need to forgive each other? Because you got offended and you got hurt. And maybe somebody did something that was wrong. Maybe somebody did something that was inappropriate. Maybe somebody did something that was not okay. Maybe it was intended, maybe it was unintended. But what is he saying? Bear with one another. Why would he say that? Because you need to bear with one another. And so the point being that Paul is talking to them about the things that are going to happen in the church. And here we are a couple thousand years later, and his words just so happen to be applicable to us today. Bear with one another. Forgive one another. Work towards unity, which does not mean uniformity, but work towards unity created not just agreeing with each other, but in the unity by the bond of the Spirit of God. It is the Spirit of God that binds us together, not agreement on particular issues, thinking about life exactly the same way. And you might say, that, Aaron, seems like a lot of work. Why in the world would I want to do that? And I would suggest that God designed church to be the place where our most important identity formation occurs. In other words, if we are going to become who God created us to become, we need each other. We need the body of Christ. We need the church. See, we don't first find ourselves and then participate in relationships. You know, like, oh, I got to get myself together. I'll kind of like find out who I am, and I want to get solid in my identity and do all that by myself. Then I'll participate in relationships. No, we were made to know our true selves in relationship with one another. We find out who we are and where it is that maybe we need to grow by being in relationship. Fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Do you know that you cannot determine whether or not you're operating in any of those by yourself? You cannot exhibit. You can think you're the most patient person in the world if you're by yourself all the time. But go drive on I-25 at rush hour and find out if patience is really in your life. Go spend time with people who annoy you. Because there's always that one person in your small group that annoys you. Do you know that that person might actually be a gift from God for you to become who He's calling you to become? See, we need each other in order to live well. And we need each other to grow in order to become like Jesus. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 17. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. If you think about sharpening, what is involved in sharpening? Sparks. Sparks are involved. But the reality is we kind of run from any sparks. But it is so important. I have a friend, his name's Glenn. Evan and Emily know him. And Glenn and I have been friends for maybe 15, coming up on 20 years now. And Glenn and I have fought. No physical fights, but there's been some really tense moments in our conversations and in our relationship. And there have been times that usually it's him that's saying mean things. I mean, not usually me, but it's usually him. So here he is saying some mean things to me, or I'm saying some mean things back to him. And I have a choice to make. But you know what I feel like doing in that moment? Getting rid of him. I don't need Glenn. Tired of you. I don't deserve to be treated like this. And yet, it has been in those moments that not only if I'm willing to humble myself and to say, man, I'm really defensive. I get angry quickly. I am quick to get angry and slow to listen. Now, I can easily point out all the ways that he was wrong. But what if those tense moments for us was actually the Holy Spirit saying, Aaron, I've got some areas in your life that I want you to work on. And the first step that I want you to do in order to be humble and gentle is I want you to go apologize to Glenn. But he started it. But did you hear what he said? I know. I'll talk to him about it. Can I talk to him about it? It's like my boys. My boys are 9, 12, 14, and 16. And this is regularly what happens. You know, we hear some noise and some screaming. Ah! I go over to see what was going on, and what's the first thing out of both of their mouths? He started it. He just punched me. Oh, why did you punch him? Well, And what are they doing? Justifying why they did what they did. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. What did you do? Well, And I wonder if God, through the people around us, is trying to say, I hear that, I'll work with them, but I'm really interested in you. I'm really interested in you. And what do I say to my boys? I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about you to you. And so it's easier to run. It's easier to start over. It's easier to justify. But what if we looked at it as a gift? And what if we said, what is it, God, that you're trying to work on in me? And the only reason and the only way that we'll get to that point is if we truly believe that life transformation happens in the context of relationships. Life transformation happens in the context of relationships. That my proximity to other people and the consistency in connection to other people is actually going to be one of the primary ways that God is going to transform my life. To make me like who He wants me to be like. I can think about the people that I've put in my life, or God has put in my life, maybe more appropriately. And so, can I just encourage you, stay committed to the people that are in your life? And too often we miss out on the things that are going to come out of the relationships in our lives because we don't stay in them long enough. And God is calling us into just being faithful and consistent in not just, though I would encourage this, in our attendance on a Sunday morning, but in our engagement within the community and specifically within the relationships of the people of God in our lives. Following Jesus outside of community to the first century Jewish people was a foreign concept. To think, I follow Jesus, but it's just me. It's as foreign as saying, I'm going to go play football. I'm going to go play a football game, and you go out and you're on the field by yourself. It's just like it doesn't connect. It's incongruent. It's not how it works. You can't play football by yourself. You can't play a team by yourself. You're not a team by yourself. It just doesn't work. And so in the same way, here we live in an individualistic Western culture that basically says, I just want to have me and my personal relationship with God. And it is so personal, but it is not private. Our relationship with God is meant to be something lived out in and with others. Following Jesus is not a me life, it is a we life. It is something that we do together. But we live in a world where individualism and isolation is on the rise. A study was done not too long ago on Google and the words that are showing up on the internet and all that kind of thing, and the words that are on the rise over the last several years are like self-personalized, things like what I can do by myself, and words that are on the decline are community, share, united, common good. Meaning something that benefits a group, not just benefits one person. And we have a culture that says we find our true answers in ourselves. We look inside, just be you be you, and I'll be me. Find your true self by just looking inside yourself. And so we become less likely to engage with others when God says, you will find yourself in Christ. You find out who you really are, who your true identity is, who your true self is. Go and look at Jesus. But Jesus has more than a head. He actually has a body. And we can't separate the head from the body. They go together. In the 1980s, there was a survey done about the number of close friends that people had. And in the 80s, on average, it was 4 to 5. Now, it's 2 to 3. And the number of people without a confidant, like I have no confidants. I don't have people in my life that I could share the secrets of my life with, has doubled. And we have chronic loneliness. Do you know that in England, in the last couple of years, they assigned and developed a new ministry? Like, they have the minister of transportation. That's what they call them there. We call them the secretary of something, but they call them the ministers of. And they now have the ministry of loneliness in the UK because they realize it's a chronic problem. And loneliness is up 20% in the last 10 years. Addictions are on the rise. I don't think anybody in our world and sitting here today would say, yeah, I don't think so. Addictions seem to be like on the decline. No, addictions are on the rise. Why? Because addictions thrive in isolation. They feed on isolation. And so I think it's important for us to get an idea of what it is that it looks like for us to engage in community and to make our lives reflect what we're talking about here. The way that I like to understand this, and it's really helpful for me, is to look at the 4 aspects of our lives. The first aspect of our life is our public life. That is what I know and you know. I'm wearing blue jeans and black shoes. I have black rimmed glasses on. I have brown hair. I know that, you know that. It's public knowledge. And sometimes some people spend all of their energy managing their public life. What do other people see? Everything having to do with a public image. But there's way more to our lives than just our public life. See, the second aspect of our lives is the masked part of our lives. That's the part that you don't know, but I know. See, you know that I have brown hair, but you don't know about the struggles that I have, the difficulties, the things I'm praying through for my own life, the tensions and the marriage between my wife and I. Why? Because that's inside. It's things that are not obviously public. But the reality is that we all need a place where we can take our mask off. We all need a place where we're willing to say, I got to tell you something. Now, I'm not saying you need to do that to everybody. And by the way, Facebook is not the place to do that. But we all need to have a place where we can say to somebody, I've got something I need to share. See, because we are only as sick as our secrets. And it is so important that we bring things out of the darkness into the light. Because shame and pain and so many other things grow in the dark, but they shrivel in the light. And so just like it says in James chapter 5, verse 16, confess your faults or your sins to one another. Why? So that you may be healed. And so that we can pray for one another, it says, if you go on. See, it says in 1 John that we go to one another, to go to God, confess your sins to God for forgiveness. And thank God that God is so forgiving and so gracious. But you ever found yourself on a regular basis, maybe going to God and I got to keep telling you this. Why do I keep struggling with this? He says, because I need you to tell someone else. Keep telling God. Keep opening your heart and your life to God. But God is saying, I need you to go open your life to someone else. I need you to take your mask off. And so it's important that we have a place where we feel safe enough to say, hey, everybody, this is what's going on. We have another aspect of our lives, and that's the blind spot area of our lives. That's what you know, but I don't know. That's the spinach in your teeth moment. You find yourself talking, da, 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 da. You don't know that you've got a hunk of vegetation hanging out of your mouth. But the person right across from you does. I don't know about you, but I really appreciate it when somebody says, hey, I don't know, this might be a little embarrassing, but I just want you to know. And obviously that's a little trivial. But there's areas of our lives that we don't see that others do. The scripture says in Proverbs chapter 27, verse 6, wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. See, when somebody points out a blind spot, it stings. And usually I find that I'm pretty defensive. And that's not true. Why? Because I can't see it. And they're like, no, it is true. No, it's not. You're defensive. No, I'm not. But it's so important that we have somebody else that is willing, because they love us, to say, hey, can I tell you a little something of how I experience you? Can I share with you what it's like to be on the other side of you? Because the last aspect of who we are is our potential. And our potential is what I don't know and you don't know. Only God knows. And God has a potential for you and for me. God has things for us to become, and therefore things for us to do. But the reality is that we will never experience our potential unless we engage our public self, our blind spots, and the mask areas of our lives. Only then will we have the chance of moving into and becoming who God's called us to be. It is vitally important that we don't just say, I want to be who God's called us to be, so I just want to manage my public expression and what I look like and filter everything and put it on Facebook and Instagram, and that's me. No, it's not. There are so much more to us, but if we are going to be who God has called us to be, it means that we have to find a place where we can take our mask off. And it means that we have to have people in our lives that are willing to say, hey, you might not notice this, but you've got some spinach in your teeth. And when that happens, we have the possibility of living into the potential that God has for each one of our lives. And the ultimate potential is for us to become more like Jesus and to be the expression of love into the world that He designed for us to be. Now, all of this is countercultural. It's completely countercultural because so therefore we have to fight the gravitational pull of our culture towards individualism and consumerism. which says, oh, I don't like this, and I don't like that, and I don't know about this, and this kind of doesn't fit my tastes. And we live in a consume and critique culture, right? We go to a restaurant, and what do we think? Oh, what did you think about that? I don't know. The waitress was okay, but the ambiance was really nice, and I liked my fries, but the salad wasn't that great. And what do? We just critique it. Post a review. Post our opinions on Facebook. But the family of God and walking with Jesus and walking with others is not consume and critique. Walking with Jesus is participate and engage. It's embrace and participate, warts and all. Warts and all. So that we can become who God's called us to become. If I think back over my life, I start to think about some of the people like Glenn, like Evan. I start to think about some of the people that I've been around and had the privilege of being with. And if I think about some of those relationships, if I think about Glenn, if I think about others throughout my life that I have long-term relationships with, they were not problem-free. And we don't see things all the same. But it has been working through those differences that has helped me to become the man that God is making me into. And that has made me a better husband, has made me a better father, has made me a better pastor, has made me a better leader, has made me a better friend. And I just want to encourage each one of us to plant ourselves in places where we have engaged deeply, consistently, through the ups and the downs. And so that as we get to different aspects of our lives, we might say, well, thank God I didn't give up on them, and thank God they didn't give up on me. I just had the privilege, I flew in last night, actually, from Montana. And the reason is I was at Eugene Peterson's funeral. Eugene Peterson, for any of you who don't know, was the guy who translated the Message Bible. But he also was a pastor for 29 years outside of Baltimore, Maryland. He wrote almost 35 books. He died at the age of 85. And as I was there sitting in this little church in Kalispell, Montana yesterday, I found myself surrounded by people that had been impacted by his life. But it wasn't just from afar. It was people from his local community, friends, neighbors were there. All these people that had been impacted by his life. But one of the things that I found to be so amazing was this guy gets up, looks like he's 30. And he says, my name is Andy. And he says, I was Eugene Peterson's pastor. I'm like, what? And he talks about how he's in this little Lutheran church that was down the street from their house. I drove by it just yesterday. It was smaller than this room right here. And he said, Jan and Eugene Peterson showed up every week. He had been there for 5.5 years. He said, but they've been showing up at that church for 15 years. He's 85. He wrote the Bible. Let's just guess that this 33-year-old pastor didn't do a great job every Sunday unpacking the Bible. How easy would it have been for Eugene Peterson to say, you know what? I don't think so. Kind of missing it. Now, young man, I I translated the Bible from the original. Can I go back to the Aramaic and the Greek and the Hebrew for you? And oh, by the way, the Syriac, this and that, and I've touched the Dead Sea Scrolls and all this. Like, nice little try, little boy, but I'm going to have to go off. And actually, there's no church around this place that's going to work for me. That's not what he said. He didn't care. He just said, I belong in and I'm a part of the body of Christ. And you know what he did? He said, you're my pastor. That is unbelievable to me. And as a pastor, you know what I did walking away from there? Dear God, please send people like that to my church. And I'm not saying so that I can do whatever I want. I'm just saying so that we can together become who God has called us to be. My prayer for you is that you would be that for Evan and Emily and for each other. So that not just in a year, not just in 6 months, and not just in 5 years, but 10, 15, 20 years from now, many of you are still here. You're like, oh yeah, I remember that middle school. Thank God for whoever designed those cushions for those hard seats. I mean, I just praying for the day that we are in a building with cushions actually attached to the seats. And so can we all stand together?